This segment is brought to you by JigMasters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to JigMasters.com and use promo code PNF20 and save 20% off your next jig order today.
Welcome to the Paddle and Fin Podcast Network. This is the final cast segment with your hosts Brad Hicks and Josh Eldridge, where we cast our final opinions on all products, good and bad. Welcome to the final cast.
Welcome back to the Paddle and Fin Network. This is the final cast. I'm your host, Josh.
I'm Brad.
And tonight we have an epic guest, Glenn Young from Z-Man. Glenn, how are you doing tonight?
Epic. That's quite a title right there. I'm going to have to add that on my business card.
Hey, man, all of our guests are epic, man. We treat our guests like kings.
Never mind.
Here.
I'm not that special, I guess.
Oh, right? No, you are. All of our guests are awesome.
Way to ruin it, Brad. Jeez. Glenn decided to sit down and talk chatterbaits because you know why? That is literally Brad's favorite bait. Brad won his first tournament and only tournament, right? You've only won one with the chatterbait.
Yeah.
But
he had to bring that up, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, it was an impressive win. It was actually last year in the spring for a river tournament that ended up turning into a lake tournament because of the awful weather that we had last year during the spring and beginning of summer. And Brad put on a showing for everybody and basically showed everybody how a chatterbait needs to be thrown in muddy 6 foot, above pool type of water. So
that's
he put on a
where
clinic.
it shines.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody started calling me Bradderbait after that.
I'm not going to touch that.
So, Glenn, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do for Z-Man, and
sure,
whatever else you'd like to share.
Sure. I'm the national sales manager for Z-Man. I also handle all international sales as well. And I've been with Z-Man for a little over 10 years now. Prior to that, I was with Shakespeare for a little while. And prior to that, I ran Gamakatsu for 10 years. And before that, I worked about a decade as a full-time guide, rep, instructor, tournament caster, everything mostly on the fly fishing side of things, because that's kind of how I got my start in the business. I started as a kid with a fly tying company when I was 12. Me and a friend of mine started a fly tying company in Oregon, and basically just tied flies for sporting goods stores all around the northwestern U.S. And
at the age of 12?
Yeah, that's when we
Nice.
started. Yeah, well, it was mostly because we loved fly fishing, but our parents wouldn't buy us the equipment we really wanted. And they said, look, if you want to buy this stuff, we'll support you, but, you got to work for it. So we started tying flies professionally and did that all the way through high school. It was great. We made a lot of money, spent every penny we ever made, never saved any of it because we blew it all on fishing equipment, which was the whole point of the deal to begin with. And it was fantastic, and me and my partner we're still best friends to this day, and we're both still in the industry. Actually, he works on the travel side of things, and he's managed lodges and stuff. And I kind of went off when I got out of the military. I kind of got back into the fishing thing as a guide and fly fishing instructor and tournament caster and all that. And I guess I've been a lifer in this industry only because I have a passion for it. I love fishing. Period.
Heck yeah, man. That's awesome. It's awesome that you got started with a company like that and you guys started your own business at such a young age and stuck with it all this time. And you get it's like they say, you won't work a day in your life if you do, something that you love. And, that's pretty cool. It's
very true.
Something a lot of us anglers would love to do, but it's not in our cards, is it, Brad?
No.
Brad's a carpenter by trade and I work in the steel industry. So.
But I'll tell you what, I'll guarantee you guys probably fish more than I do.
I've always thought about that. I didn't know how much people in the industry actually do get to fish.
It's honestly, it's not as often as you'd think. For me, being in the industry as long as I have, I've been on numerous television shows and I've appeared on a lot of different YouTube videos and things like that over the years for different companies. And I've been fortunate. I've been able to travel the world doing this. And so people who know me from the videos that I've been in. So that's all they know of me. There are no videos of me sitting in front of spreadsheets all day. There are only videos of me fishing and catching fish, so they assume that's what I do. And granted, I do get to fish a fair amount. I've had the opportunity to fish a lot of great places. But, and this is what I tell people, I do seminars for colleges and high schools and stuff too. And first question I'll ask these guys when I walk into a room, because a lot of them who know me, I walk in and I'm a rock star to these guys. So I walk in and I ask them one question: how many of you in this room want my job? And every hand goes up. And I say, okay, now let's get something straight. Before you make your career choices, let's understand there are two things you will not get in this industry. The first is wealthy. The second is time to fish. So you better keep that in mind before you decide to jump into this business full time. You know, and like I said, there are worse businesses to be in, but the fact is I don't get to fish as often as people think I do.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you hear that often also.
I still enjoy it. Yeah, I mean, that's just the fact. I mean, this is a business. And, you know, most of the time I'm busy running the business. You know, that's what I do.
Yeah, you mentioned international too, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do all the international sales as well. That was awesome. I think in 2015, I got to spend a couple of weeks in Australia because we're the #1 lure brand there and have been for many years. And I got to go down there and train up a bunch of the salespeople and stuff down there. And I got an opportunity to fish while I was there and film some videos and stuff with guys. And this year I get to go to Europe for the European Tackle Show. So, I mean, I've been fortunate. When I was with Gamakatsu, I got to go to Japan a few times. And, you know, I've been very, very fortunate. I have, you know, so it's not like, oh, I never get to fish and this job sucks. I mean, it's a, you know, it's a great gig. I just don't get to fish as much as I would really like to because I love fishing.
That's awesome.
So, kind of going off what you were just talking about with visiting Japan, I've always kind of had, you know, you see that there's a lot of, fishing lure tackle companies that are based out of Japan. And is it as big as it is here in Japan?
I wouldn't say it's as big as it is here, only because of the population base and the access to fishing that they have. From what we see on our end, we presume that it is huge. And fishing is a huge part of their life over there. But the bass fishing part of it is very, very small. Most of their fishing is done in saltwater. And if you ever want to see some really funny videos, go look up ayu fishing in Japan, because, I mean, that's one of the things that they do over there in some of the rivers they have there. And it's where they're using a telescoping rod that's like 25 to 30 feet long. And they've got a live ayu on the other end of it that's got hooks hanging all over it that they lower into another hole to snag another ayu that tries to attack it. And then they throw it into a tiny little net in the air. So it's
wow,
I mean, it's a crazy fishery, and they spend thousands upon thousands of dollars to do it. But the thing with the Japanese tackle industry, and I think the thing that most of us here in the West have learned to appreciate, is their craftsmanship. You know, when they sit down to design a lure or a method or anything like that, it's very, very detailed, very precise. I mean, they don't just rush something to market. They test it for a long time, and there's a lot that goes into every bit of it. It's probably a lot more artful over there than a lot of the lure businesses here.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you kind of see some of the companies out there, they'll start cutting us corners with the cheaper hooks, and you know, just it's well known in the industry how a lot of people, as soon as they buy a jerkbait, they're switching out the hooks of it. So I've been a subscriber for Mystery Tackle Box, and there's a huge difference in the American made products versus the Japanese products as far as like the hardware that comes already installed on your lures. And it's kind of crazy to see the difference. And like you said, the craftsmanship that you see, and even like the attention to color and detail within, it's just second to none, really, when it comes down to it.
Well, there's a huge pride factor involved for them, too. I mean, they're not going to put something out that anybody would want to perceive as junk. You know, I mean, working for Gamakatsu for 10 years, I learned that in the hook industry. I mean, you could say it's just bending wire and putting a point on the end. But the amount of time and care and thought that they put into every single hook that they ever engineered, designed, or built is what put them on the map. It wasn't just let's run some wire through a mill and hey, here's a pointy thing and I hope it holds up for you. I mean, they took their time and crafted every single hook that they made. They were by far, when I started with them, they were nothing. I mean, nobody knew who they were, and people were telling me, man, ain't no way nobody's going to spend $2.99 on a pack of hooks. And right. And
now
what are you
look
paying
at
now for a pack of hooks, right? You'd love to pay $2.99 for a pack of hooks.
Yeah.
But,
especially
Gamakatsu. But back then, right. Yeah. But back then, nobody would even conceive of spending money, that kind of money on a hook, until you explained to them. It's like, well, all right, you spent how much on your rod, how much on your reel. You made sure you bought the best line that there was on the market so it wouldn't break. And you really want to put a piece of crap hook at the end of all of that, the one piece that has to hold on to what you just spent a fortune to pursue?
Right.
No. You know, it's like, no, you really want to. That's the most important part of the whole thing. Right there.
That and the line.
Yes. And so that's really kind of what got Gamakatsu going, was that whole perceived quality, you know, and it's still there. I mean, they engineer their own steel. They do everything right there in their own facility. They don't farm stuff out. They don't source stuff out to other countries. You know, they take pride in the fact that they craft everything.
Yeah.
Nice.
So Glenn happens to be a kayak fisherman as well.
I am.
Glenn said that he is a 99.9% kayak fisherman.
Yep.
And so you want to tell us how you got into kayak fishing? What kind of boat you got going on right now?
I couldn't afford a boat, so that's what got me into kayak fishing.
Same here.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what a lot of us do,
Make it
right?
really simple. I mean, I started fishing out of kayaks in the Northwest when I was living out there. And I just found it so convenient because I could launch it anywhere.
Right.
There were a lot of creeks and rivers and places that I could get to in my kayak that the guys in boats just couldn't get to. And I found that the gas was a lot cheaper in my kayak too. It didn't cost nearly as much to fill that up. And so, I mean, I've always just been, even when I was a kid, I mean, me and my buddy fished out of float tubes forever. You know, we didn't buy boats and stuff. We fished out of float tubes, you know, and even back, and I'll tell you a funny float tube story. When we first bought our float tubes in '79, that's going back a ways, people didn't know what those were, and they would see us out in the water paddling. It was like, y'all got a motor under that thing? How are you getting around? They couldn't understand the concept of having little scuba fins and moving around. And the one time that actually came in handy for me was when I was stationed in San Antonio. I used to go out and fish a place called Calaveras Lake, and I would take my float tube out there, which the first thing you have to understand when you fish a float tube anywhere in Texas is you realize that you're a rest stop for water moccasins.
Oh.
So you have to be armed, because they're out there swimming around. They just see an island. It's like, oh, thank God, an island. And they really see you as an opportunity to rest. Yeah. But I was fishing off the face of the dam, and I was annihilating the stripers. And this boat saw me killing all these stripers. So he immediately started motoring. It wasn't even a fishing boat. It was just a giant pleasure boat. And he started to plow towards me. And I'm turning around looking at this guy like, oh, my God, are you serious? And the guy on the bow of the boat turned back to the guy driving it and threw his hands up in the air, waving at him to stop. Whoa, stop. And he looks at me and he says, are you standing up out there? And I immediately said, yeah, it's super shallow. I don't think I'd bring that big boat in here if I were you. He said, oh, my God, thanks, man. And they turned around and left.
That's awesome.
Nice.
They didn't understand that it was 60 feet deep where I was fishing right there.
That's
those were details that I didn't need to tell them. So I've always kind of been that kind of an angler, the guy that's, you know, I like the access. I like having control over where I can launch and where I can put in. And for me, it's just always been kayaks. And, you know, I just, that's probably the way I'll always be. I love fishing out of a kayak.
Awesome. You mentioned you had a native Propel 10.
I do. Yeah. I recently bought that. I've had it for just a couple of months now. And I absolutely love it. I mean, for a 10-foot boat, it is incredibly stable, you know, because I can stand up and, you know, and flip patties and stuff like that with it. When I'm fishing saltwater with it, having that pedal drive when you're in a current situation in tidewater and stuff. Oh, it's so nice being able to control where I can go and all that, and not have to paddle constantly and then set the paddles down and then cast. I mean, I have an anchor system for it, and I hardly ever use it.
Yeah.
Because I don't need to. I can control myself so well with that pedal drive system that even on windy days on a lake or stuff, I very rarely have to use the anchor. And I absolutely love that feature about that boat. Just for a 10-foot boat, it fits easily in my garage, loads in the back of my pickup truck. It takes me literally, I timed it 2 minutes to load that boat in the back of my truck, strap it down, and leave.
That's not bad.
No, it's not bad at all. So it's just
not me. It takes me forever
so
to get ready, doesn't it, Brad?
Yeah. It's all good though. It's all good.
No, I absolutely love it. It's really spoiled me having that boat now. The places I've been able to fish with it, I can launch anywhere with a boat like that. And I love that factor. And, living here in Charleston, we fish a lot of saltwater here for redfish and speckled trout. And, and having that boat just affords me the ability to get places that a lot of the other boats really just can't get to as easily as I can.
Heck yeah. That seems to be the trend with kayak fishermen. What, kind of we all get attracted to is that ability to reach those hard to reach places. And also, like you touched on, it's cost effective, a lot of people get sticker shock really over some of the prices of pedal drives, but in the long run, you're not, getting motorboats up and down those small creeks, those rivers. And even with a lake, man, even with if it has, a packed boat ramp, you could still usually launch somewhere close to there, and not even have to wait. So
a lot of it just comes down to accessibility, and I think that's the biggest benefit of having a kayak like that is accessibility. Just there's so many more places that I can have access to with that kind of a boat that you just can't have with a big boat.
Yeah. Well, we're going to go ahead.
At that point, it's worth it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's get into some ChatterBait talk. What do you think, Brad?
Yeah, man. I'd like to go into where the ChatterBait started exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Like the original, I guess.
The original ChatterBait. Actually, there's for all of your listeners out there, there's a fantastic documentary out there. It's called The $1 Million Idea, and it's on a website called 20 Feet Deep. And this documentary, I mean, if you ever have 20 minutes to kill and you just want to watch the most fascinating story ever, this is it. And it's interviews with Ron Davis and Ron Davis Jr., the guys that invented the original ChatterBait, how they came up with the idea, how it came to market, how Z-Man got involved with this whole thing. It's an absolutely fascinating story because, let's face it, it is a very unique lure.
Yeah.
And when it came out, it created a category that didn't exist before, bladed swim jigs. And now in every tackle shop, there's a category for that. It's not a lure, it's a category. And that's an important distinction with the ChatterBait, that it's not just another bladed type of lure. This is an entire category.
Yeah.
And so when it started off, it was invented by Ron Davis from Rad Lures. And this, it started happening probably around, like 2005, around in that frame when he was really working on it. And where it really hit the big time was around 2006 when Brian Thrift won a tournament on Lake Toho by a big margin using this lure. And of course, you know how the bass guys are. Once somebody wins a tournament on a lure they've never seen before, everybody has to have it.
Yeah.
And so immediately it just exploded. And in fact, at that time, I remember when that came out because I was still at Gamakatsu at the time. I remember when this came out, and you could actually find ChatterBaits on eBay for $100 a piece.
Wow.
Oh yeah, because essentially, Rad Lures at the time couldn't keep up with the demand that was created by all the hype surrounding this thing. And that's kind of where Z-Man got involved. So Zmans history goes back. We've actually been around more than 30 years. But as a consumer brand, we've only been around since about 2008. Prior to that, we were a manufacturer of silicone skirts. So we had a skirt plant here in Charleston that we manufactured skirts for basically every manufacturer out there that made spinnerbaits and jigs at the time. And because we had sources and we had resources and we could get things done, that's about the time that Radler's approached Z-Man about helping take over the manufacture and distribution of the ChatterBait. Because essentially, they couldn't keep up. There was just way too much demand, and they just simply didn't have the resources to handle it, but Z-Man did.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they came to Z-Man at the time. So they came to Z-Man. We took over the sourcing and distribution for it. And then what happened was in 2008, we actually bought it outright. So we actually bought the ChatterBait and got the patents and everything secured in 2008. That's essentially what started Z-Man on the path of becoming a consumer brand that we are now, was that. So
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I believe the first time I heard of the original ChatterBait was probably 2014.
So you're late to the game. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I was probably late. Because I was just getting into kayak fishing at that time.
But that's okay. You got to win on it, so that's all good.
Yeah.
But, at that time, it was very unique. It was a game changer for the entire industry. So that's kind of what brought us into being the ChatterBait company originally. Mm-hmm. And of course, now, we're far beyond just being recognized as the ChatterBait company. We've moved way beyond that now. In fact, it's funny. I've actually been on trips recently where people see me wearing Z-Man stuff and like, oh my God, I love your Ned rigs. Whereas it used to be, oh my God, I love your ChatterBaits. And now it's like they know us for other stuff now, which is fine.
Yeah.
But since then, the ChatterBait as a category has continued to grow. And as you're well aware, we have numerous different offerings within the ChatterBait family. And the reason that we do that is because we're all fishermen. Everybody that works in a company is a fisherman. I mean, our president, Daniel Nussbaum, is a hardcore angler. I think Daniel's probably on a first name basis with every redfish in Charleston by now. Seriously, I mean, the guy, I hate fishing with him because he's so freaking good. It's one of those things like, do I let him cast or not? Yeah. When you fish with him, he's one of those guys. And, and I fish and everybody that works with us fishes. We're all anglers. So we all have the same type of passion. And we also understood that once the ChatterBait started to take off, we needed to be able to offer different models at different price points with different components to satisfy the needs of all the anglers that are out there. Because, face it, especially, bass guys are really a picky bunch.
Yeah.
And they really are. They're the kind of guys that'll look at a bait and go, well, that's really good, but you got to move that one little black fleck from here over to here, and then you got something. Okay, buddy.
It's true.
So, so when you look at, the original ChatterBait, that came out. The next step in the evolutionary process for us was the Elite Series, because we knew that working with our pros at the time, we needed to be able to offer a higher end, higher quality ChatterBait out there, because the original ChatterBait is a price point item, and it always will be. It's one of those things that's designed to be accessible for everybody, and it still catches fish, even though there's all these other models. Bass haven't seemed to gotten the memo yet that, they can still eat this one. They don't have to take all the newer models. Yeah. But each one's designed a little bit different. So when we look at the Elite Series, the Elite Series uses a Gamakatsu hook on it. It's got a 5/0 Gamakatsu spinnerbait hook on it. The head design's a little bit different than the original in that it's a little bit flatter and wider than the original. And the blade is connected to not the hook eye, but a wire form at the front of that head. So it's close to the head so that it's designed to make contact with the head, on a retrieve. And that's the whole idea behind that. And then we put, a serious keeper behind it. We upgraded all of the components on that to make it truly the elite ChatterBait. So that was your next step up in quality, was that one. Then from there, what we did is we expanded that into then the Project Z chatterbaits. So the
my
Project
favorite
Thank you. See, you know what? We're getting along just fine.
That's the one I won the tournament on. That's the one I've caught all my biggest fish on.
It's still personally my favorite as well.
Yeah.
That's what, if I'm going to throw a chatterbait, most of the time it's going to be an Elite, or not the Elite, but the Project Z. I just love the action on it. And I think a lot of the reason that the guys like that, when you look at it, the blade design and the head design are completely different.
Yeah.
When you look at the Elite, the blade's out front, and it's more of like a swim jig design. It's got more of a swim jig head on it, and the blade's out front, which to me gives it more freedom of movement.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the knocks on chatterbaits for some people is that they don't always vibrate right away as soon as they hit the water. You got to give them a little start to get them going.
Yeah.
The Project Z starts vibrating the second it hits the water and there's any tension on it. So it's vibrating immediately, and it has a little bit of a wider swing to it. It's just different. So for me, that's what drew me to the Project Z, was like, I love this, the action, the vibration, it's immediate on it. And then from there, I evolved into taking the skirt off of it and just rigging a straight up razor shad on it without a skirt. And that is my go-to chatterbait now.
Really?
Yes, it is.
I'm gonna have to try that. I do use the razor shads.
Are just a lot better. Well, the razor shad's a great chatterbait trailer, but I think there are some situations where I don't want the big bulky skirt profile. Mm-hmm. I want the bait fish profile. So in a situation like that, I take that skirt off. I go straight razor shad on a Project Z body. And then I can take it a step further. If I want to throw it into the cover, we make the Project Z weedless. Okay, so we have the one with the brush guard. And I will tell you this from experience, it is weedless. I have tried to hang that thing up and can't do it.
Huh.
The first year we came out with that, I had some customers. I used to do an annual trip out on the West Coast on the California Delta, and I would bring a lot of my dealers and stuff out there. And the first year we had the weedless version of it, I had one rigged up on a client's rod. And he looked at me and said, "What's this?" I said, "Well, that's the new weedless Project See." He looked at me with that look in his eye and said, "Weedless, huh?" And I could tell immediately. I'm like, "Oh, are you going to be that guy?" And he immediately chucked it as far back into the tulies as he could. There wasn't even water there. It was just straight into the tulies. Just so that he had that little smirk on his face, and he started reeling, and it came through. So
that's cool.
He said, "Okay, I guess it is weedless." So it is a weedless version of it. So when I am fishing around structure and stuff, I tend to go with that. And typically when I fish that, I do take the skirt off and throw the razor shad on there. Just so I get that more slender profile on it. So that's the Project Z. And the Project Z is higher end components. Okay, so it's got the Mustad fast attach clip on the front. It has a Mustad Ultra Point 5/0 hook on there. It's got double barbed keepers. It's got a dual umbrella skirt on it. I mean, this thing is a souped up chatterbait.
Yeah,
it really is.
It's funny you mentioned the thing being such like a swim bait type bladed jig. I literally tell everybody that, and I feel like that bait shines in grassy situations. And I like to throw mine with a turbo crawl trailer, actually.
Oh, that's a good one too. On any of the natural colored chatterbaits, we typically try to throw the turbo crawl as a trailer on that.
Yeah.
If it's not a shad pattern, we use the turbo crawl as a trailer on that.
Yeah.
That's definitely a good choice on that one. But you're right, because, and in grassy situations, one of the things with the chatterbait, when it first came out, it was kind of a seasonal bait. It was one of those things that was just really thrown early in the spring. Grass is high. You've got to be able to bring it through grass, and a chatterbait excels in grassy situations. Since then, of course, it's become a year-round go-to bait because there are so many different ways that you can throw it. But with the Project Z, because the blade is further out in front, it does tend to come through that grass pretty clean. It doesn't catch a whole lot coming through. It pretty much just chops its way through, and with that sleek head design, it really comes through the grass well. I think that's why a lot of guys like that. It's funny because, I watch the chatter going on, online and stuff with guys, and, everybody loves the jackhammer, which we'll get into, but you still got those guys like, no, I'll stick with my Project Z.
That's me. You've probably seen my comments. No, man.
I'm that same kind of guy.
Yeah.
That's the way I'll do it as well. But you have the Project Z. Then from there we moved into the next thing that came out was the ChatterBait Freedom, the one with the swing head design and kind of that that sleek bullet shaped head on it, with a wide gap hook on the back. That was designed to come out as a weedless chatterbait, and that was actually before we had the ChatterBait Project Z weedless. We had the Freedom. So the Freedom was designed to be that heavy cover type of chatterbait that you could bring it through the mats, the grass, timber, things like that without it hanging up. The thing with the Freedom when it first came out, the thing that a lot of us have realized since then is that it is truly a situational chatterbait. It's the one that you want to throw when you are throwing into cover, because in open water, your hookup percentage is not very good on it. The reason is this: you're fishing a Texas rigged plastic on the back of a reaction bait. All right. So those two things don't always go well together. And as a real world example, back on the Delta, we were fishing the thicker tules. So I was throwing the Freedom at one time, and I was throwing into this patch of tules, and I caught 3 straight on that. The fourth fish, because the water's clear, I watched him pursue the chatterbait outside of the tules. Once he swiped at it, and I missed him. Oh. Because you have to remember that your cover take is different than your open water take. Your cover take is very deliberate. Fish tend to grab onto things and hold onto them more than what they do in open water. Open water, they tend to run at things, slash at things. They're hitting it on the move. So it's very, very different. And when you have a Texas rigged plastic on the back of a reaction bait like that, your hookup percentage isn't going to be as high because of that slashing take that they're using. So, and I got to see that firsthand. I watched him come out. I watched him swipe at it, and I saw me miss it firsthand. So I immediately understood, okay, look, this is where this bait shines, is in the cover, because they grab it, they hang on to it. I never missed one in cover. In open water, I didn't get every single one that hit it. So it was one of those things to where, you have to be mindful of where you're throwing each one of these different models. Yeah. So we had that. And then, of course, later on came the Jackhammer. And the Jackhammer was actually kind of a funny story, because Brett Height designed that. And there was a lot of pressure on us to bring it out. And we debated internally for quite a while as to whether or not we could actually sell a $16 chatterbait. Yeah. It's like, nobody's going to spend that kind of money on one of these things. I mean, there's no way. And of course, now we can't keep them in stock. Yeah. And, it was like, well, we should have started at 20. But, that everybody loves that thing. And one of the things that does make that different, and each one of these chatterbaits that we've mentioned so far has a different action from the other. Okay, so each one vibrates differently. Each one swims differently. Each one has a different profile in the water. The Jackhammer has a little bit smaller profile when you look at it. It's not as big and bulky as, say, a Project Z. It's a little bit smaller profile when you look at the head design and things like that. And the head design is kind of curved on the bottom, and the blade is set up front, so it's a very super tight vibration, and it's designed to hunt a little bit more than what some of the other chatterbaits do. So on a standard retrieve, it's kind of going to hunt a little bit, go back and forth a little bit, or if you make the retrieve a little bit more erratic, it's going to hunt a little bit more. And there are a lot of guys that say that's what makes the difference for the Jackhammer, is that hunting action, which is one of the things that makes it so effective. Component-wise, high-quality components. It's got a Gamakatsu hook on there. It's got a decoy egg snap on there. The blade is actually a different thickness than the original chatterbaits. Okay, so it's a different thickness than the other ones. It's got, a dual keeper on there. It's got a hand-tied skirt on it. It's got an elaborate paint job on the head with eyes on there. There are a lot of things that set that apart, and people are like, how come it costs so much? The main reason that it's so expensive is because that's the one chatterbait we don't actually manufacture ourselves. We have to get it from Evergreen. Okay. So we have to get it from Evergreen overseas, which costs that much more because we have to pay them, and then we have to get it shipped over. And then there's, all the, additional import fees and stuff like that. And it's actually the lowest margin item that we sell as a company.
Yeah.
It really
That's
is.
interesting.
And yeah. But we had to do that because we had to set that price at a point when we thought it would still be accessible. And that's why I say, looking back, I mean, shoot, we could have gone a couple bucks higher, and probably been just fine. But we wanted to try to keep that retail price as low as we could and still cover our cost to import it.
Yeah.
Right.
Having no idea that it was going to explode the way that it has.
Yeah.
So there was.
Go ahead, guys.
I was going to say that if you're not tournament, if you're a tournament angler and you're not using these, man, you're not doing something right. Because it seems like every tournament angler out there is using this bait.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
They are. I mean, pretty much everybody's fishing it. I mean, the Classic last year was one on it. So, I mean, everybody's throwing it.
Yeah.
Everybody has one in their box. And a lot of it is that perceived value, that because it is more expensive, because of the different action, that it will catch more fish. And it's funny because the year that we launched that, it exploded immediately. And I remember laughing because I got an email from another tournament. I think it was an Elite Series event. That was won on the original ChatterBait, the $4.99 version. It's like 2 months after we launched the Jackhammer, which everybody said is the greatest ChatterBait ever. But it's like, well, the bass will still eat the other one.
Yeah.
They didn't know they were supposed to eat the Jackhammer, and they still don't know that.
It's funny you mentioned that because Derek Brundle is down at the 10 for the KBF, the 10 Invitational. And he was catching them. He was catching them on the original, but he could not get a bite on the Jackhammer. And he gave one to his buddy who was like, "Use this, dude. They're biting this. They're not biting the Jackhammer." I thought that was funny.
That is funny. That is funny. And that's the kind of stuff that never makes it to the public viewers, right?
Yeah.
They all hear about the Jackhammer and how great it is. But like you and I have already mentioned, I mean, I'm still going to go back to the Project Z, or actually it was a couple of weeks ago when I was fishing. I was on an outrageous topwater bite. It died. And I looked at my box and I had an original chatterbait already rigged up with a razor shad. So I threw that on and immediately started catching fish.
Nice.
So, and I was like, but this isn't a jackhammer. These fish aren't supposed to hit this.
Yeah.
But a lot of it's that perceived value. If the guy has confidence in what he's throwing, he's going to fish better. He's going to catch more fish. And that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
If you have confidence in what you're throwing, you're going to catch fish. And now we look at, so we've expanded the lineup again since then. This last year, we introduced another Freedom chatterbait called the CFL.
Mm-hmm.
And this one's really cool. This might start to fall into one of my favorite categories here as I start to throw this thing a little bit more. I really like this one. This one has a football head. It's a swing head design, but it's a football head. And the blade is super close to the head. So picture, a blade on top of a football head really close.
Wow.
You know it's going to knock the crap out of it, right? So that blade is knocking back and forth. But the biggest advantage to this design is that it will not ride up. And that's one of the biggest gripes with a lot of chatterbait models is that if you retrieve them too quickly, they will come to the surface.
Yeah.
They tend to want to ride up a little bit. This one, when we introduced it at ICAST, I was out at the On the Water event, and I would have guys throw it out there and immediately start retrieving as fast as they could so that the bait was still on the surface to see if they could get it to come up to the top, and they couldn't do it.
Huh.
It sounds like a good version of the chatterbait that could be fished like deep and away from the grass then.
Exactly.
Like on ledges.
Yeah.
Rock piles, things like that. Because what are football heads really designed for? They're designed for rocky areas primarily.
Yep.
The football head is designed to work its way through rocks without hanging up. Well, this thing is going to be ideal for those rocky ledges, rocky boulder patches, things like that, where you want that bait down and you want it to stay down the entire time. That's what the CFL does. And the price point comes in, I think this one is like $11.99, something like that. So, it's not, super expensive, but it's good quality premium components on this thing as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a really, really good solid bait. And I think we're going to do pretty well with that one because the guys that have thrown it so far are really, really liking it. Just
Is
because
that
of
a
that
newer?
vibration. Oh, and the head is actually different. It's actually made out of zinc instead of lead. So it has a different sound.
Yeah. That's a newer one you said?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
That's our newest chatterbait, is that one. Yep.
Okay, I thought I saw that in the stores, but I didn't know what quite sure what it was for, so I'm glad you went over that.
So is that zinc giving like a more high pitched noise
Yeah.
or like a
Yeah,
deeper
it's a
sound?
different sound. Yeah, it's a completely different sound than what the lead does. So it's a different vibration, a different sound, and because it's a swing head design, depending on what trailer you put back there, you're going to have a different action than what you get off the regular chatterbaits.
That's what a lot of people say about the Jackhammer as well. It gives an even more unique sound.
Yes, it is a different sound because of the way that blade makes contact with the head. It's a completely different sound.
Yeah.
You know, and it's pretty noisy too. It was recently, just a few days ago, actually, my distributor in South Africa posted a video on his website and had underwater footage of the Jackhammer with a microphone. You could hear it. I was surprised at how loud that was.
Yeah, I might have seen a video by Wired to Fish. They did the same thing with all 12 of them, I believe.
Yep.
I thought that was really interesting. That's what gave me the inspiration to ask you to come on the show.
Yeah, because I mean, they're all different sounds. They're all different actions. Mm-hmm. They all have their place. They all have their application. You know, and a lot of it just comes down to personal preference. You know, from the angler. Whatever you have confidence in. You know, so we know what Brad's confident bait is. So.
Well, I like the price point of that one as well. I just feel like it's like the best bang for your buck.
And look, and I agree with you. I really do. When we made the decision to switch a lot of our chatterbaits to that fast attach clip on the front, the reason that we did that is because the original clip design was okay, but look, there were guys that were opening the thing or breaking it or whatever. Mm-hmm. So when we decided to go to the fast attach clip, we actually tested that clip for a full week in Venice, Louisiana on bull reds. And if we couldn't open one of those things up on a 30-pound bull red on straight 50-pound braid, then I know the bass guy's not going to open that thing up either.
Yeah.
We never, ever had one fail. And that's when we decided to go with that type of clip, and we slowly kind of did inline changes with a lot of our baits to have that incorporated on all of them.
Yeah. I have a quick question, Glenn, regarding like trailers for chatterbaits in general. Mm-hmm. I've seen a few videos here and there where they talk about trying to match the vibration. And you'll see things like the Kayak get flipped upside down because they think it matches the vibration a little bit better. Mm-hmm. A lot of people will kind of use like Brad likes to use a turbo crawl because the turbo crawl will kind of match whatever it's kind of on in a sense by itself. Do you think that's important? Do you think
it's very important?
Yeah,
it is. And not so much in matching the vibration as much as it is trying to match up the profile or the action that you need. Yeah. So, for example, like when Brad's using a turbo craw behind one of the chatterbaits, most of those chatterbaits are probably more in the natural color, not typically the shad colors that you're using. And the turbo craw will have a lot of action behind it. Okay, well, those two little claws are going to be moving quite a bit behind there. If you look at the razor shad isn't designed to have a lot of action behind a chatterbait. Yeah. And if you actually look at it behind a chatterbait, it's just kind of there, but it just slowly, it's just not even, really it just tight. Kind of vibrates a little bit. It doesn't do much, but it's not designed to. It's there to add a baitfish profile to the whole thing. Then if you need additional vibration behind that, that's when guys will go to like the diesel minnow. Yeah. And throw a diesel minnow on behind there because now you've got a paddle tail on the back. So if I have dirtier water, I want to add to that vibration. That's when I'm going to put on a paddle tail behind the back of it because I want that additional vibration. The thing you have to remember, excuse me, the thing you have to remember is that blade is disrupting so much water out front that not a lot of that water is actually going to get to that trailer in the back to force it to move. So you're not going to get quite as much action back behind that bait on some of those trailers as you think you're going to based on its shape. But Right. So when you look at something like a diesel minnow, that's guys will go to the diesel minnow because it's not only a shad profile, but they do get a little bit more thump behind it because it is far enough back and that tail is shaped that it's still going to thump and move back behind the chatterbait. Right. So that's when the guys are going to that. And when you go to more of a natural type of color, that's where you want the turbo craws because the turbo craws is going to have that dual action. It's like a twin tail grub.
Yeah.
It's going to be moving and swirling around in the water. So it's not going to create a lot of vibration, but it's going to create a lot of action.
Yeah.
It's going to disturb a little bit more water, and there's going to be a lot more movement behind that bait. So when you think about what a chatterbait is, truly, what it is, it's the flash of a spinnerbait.
Mm-hmm.
It's the vibration of a crankbait and the profile of a jig. And so then anything that you add in behind that is going to accentuate that bait from there.
Interesting. Yeah. I never thought about it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
What's even nicer,
it's a combination of a lot of things.
Yeah, and with the football head design one, man, that thing would probably be killer with like a crawl, the turbo crawl.
Exactly. Yeah, the turbo
Yeah.
crawl is pretty much going to be the ideal trailer that most guys are going to be throwing behind that one. Is pretty much the turbo crawl based on how they're fishing it, the depth they're fishing it at. They're going to want the additional action of those, little trailers back behind that. Not only that, the other thing that you can do with it, a lot of guys will fish a chatterbait as a jig, and with a buoyant trailer on the back, like a turbo crawl, you can put it on the bottom, rip it up towards the top, let it go back down to the bottom. Rip it towards the surface again, let it go back down. And that's one of the presentations that I don't think a lot of guys are doing with the chatterbait, that you don't hear about a lot, but it's frequently used by guys fishing deeper water.
Yeah. Kentucky Lake, I feel like that one would shine.
Yes. Yep. Oftentimes that's where we sell a lot of the heavier versions of the chatterbaits that we have, like the Project Z, we make up to a 1 ounce because of that. The Jackhammer, we make in 1.25 ounces because of fisheries like that where the guys want to drop it off a ledge, get it down into deep water, rip it up, let it drop back down. And the thing is, if you're going to do that, you're going to have a trailer on the back that's going to provide some action and some buoyancy so that when it does get to the bottom, it is going to stand up a little bit so it can still be seen.
Yeah. And you did mention something that kind of brought me back to when I first started using one, because I remember using it on Brad and I are primarily smallmouth guys. We fish rivers a lot, and I remember first throwing it with some spinning gear and stuff, but I would miss a lot of fish. And when you were bringing up the fact that you're basically fishing a Texas rigged single hook style bait, I remember even when I got into throwing bait casters, in my mind the whole time was, this is a moving bait. This is a moving bait.
Yes.
Oh, medium action kind of stuff you would throw with crankbaits. And I remember I would get hits, but I guess that's kind of where I was falling short as far as like what kind of rod, that I was using in a sense. And I think that's why you're starting to see more and more guys are throwing like medium heavy rods, because you're basically fishing a Texas rigged bait that happens to move, like you said. And I have yet to try that all last year until you kind of mentioned that. I had never really kind of put that in thought, like that single hook is going to be hard to throw on like a moderate action medium rod, or, to get a good hook set, I guess,
Right. Yeah, it is. And a lot of times you got to remember, you have to let them load up on it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a reaction bait, and a lot of times they're going to swipe at it and hopefully you get them. But still, you have to allow them to grab it, load up on it before you really try to drive that hook through them. And it's easier said than done because, look, I mean, I'm a smallmouth guy too. I mean, I'm a total smallmouth junkie. I lived in Columbia, South Carolina for 11 years, and I fished the Broad River all the time.
Oh,
and and my biggest smallmouth ever came on a chatterbait, and that river is a 22 incher. Wow. And it was a heck of a fish, and that was on a chatterbait, and that was one of those ones I had to make sure he loaded up on it first. And I was fishing that one more as a jig. I was actually casting upriver, working it back down through a seam line, as a jig when he hit that. So I did have the opportunity to let him pick it up, feel it, and hit him, instead of a lot of times when you're throwing a chatterbait, it's a chuck and wind lure primarily. Yeah. You throw it, you wind it back in. So you're getting a lot of those swiping takes and things like that. So the rod action has to be such that it allows you to let the fish grab it, load up on it before you try to drive that hook through them.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that they have it. That's the main thing. And with reaction lures, a lot of times they don't. I mean, that's just the nature of fishing reaction lures. Yeah. A lot of times it's an investigative strike. They don't always get it. They just kind of slap at it. You're not always going to get those fish.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Me and Josh are both smallmouth fishermen, as mentioned before. What chatterbait are you throwing in the river?
Primarily, actually, that biggest one I caught was on an Elite series.
Okay.
That was on the Elite in the bluegill color. But most of the time, if I'm fishing the river, that's typically where I've pretty much gone to the Naked Project Z with a razor shad. That's pretty much what I'm throwing most of the time in the river. I just feel like that profile just suits the river fishing better. I like the action that I get off of it. I like the control that I have over that particular bait without a skirt on it, controlling the profile, the action of it, all that. For me, it's just, it's a confidence thing. So we all kind of gravitate towards our comfort zone. And for me, that bait is my comfort zone when it comes to smallies in the river. So I typically throw that one quite a bit.
And do you guys offer like your chatterbaits without the skirts? Or?
We don't, actually. No. We've looked at that in the past, and I'm not going to say we won't offer it in the future. But for right now, we don't. We just kind of leave it up to the angler. Yeah. You guys pick your trailer, you pick the profile you want. Because honestly, if the water's dirty, I'm going to leave the skirt on. I want the big profile in dirty water. I mean, I have to. But the Broad River typically runs very clear. Very seldom was I fishing it when it was just blown to hell and just chocolate milk. Most of the time, that river was clear. And when that water's clear, I take the skirt off every single time.
Complete opposite of our rivers here in Ohio. they're always a mess here.
If they're dirty, then that's typically why you're probably throwing the darker colors using a turbo crawl in the back. Yep. You need as much noise as you can get out of that thing.
Yep.
I told Brad to start adding glass beads to his line too.
You should just start lining up beads with spacers in between them on your line leading up to your bait. So every time you jerk it, it's like click, 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 click.
That's funny.
Somebody's like, the fish are like, is that a boat?
No, you always think of smallmouth. You always think of smaller baits. So I didn't know if you threw like smaller chatterbaits or anything.
Not at all. No, not at all. To me, a smallmouth is a very opportunistic predator fish. I mean, they're very aggressive by nature. I've caught them on huge baits. In fact, I think the one I had to laugh at the most on the Broad was I was throwing our Streak XL, which is an 8-inch jerk bait. And I had it rigged on a 12-aught EWG, and I put a G-stinger on the back of it, rigged up top, just because, I mean, it's, there's no way in hell they're going to get a 12-aught in their mouth. And the first cast I made with that into a pocket, I hooked a 16-inch smallmouth who came in without the stinger hook in him, but the 12-aught through the roof of his mouth. So,
wow.
So I discount nothing when it comes to smallies. I mean, they're just aggressive fish. When they want to kill something, they're going to kill it.
It's true. Like, I mean, I did downsize my swim baits over the, past couple years. But I mean, when I first started throwing them, I was throwing the 5-inch Kayak at them all the time. And I caught a lot of big fish like that. So, I kind of think that when you do downsize, it just kind of starts to match the hatch a little bit more, at least where we live,
Yeah.
But I mean, because it's kind of rare for you to, I mean, we have big shad in our river systems, but they kind of come and go real quick. Like I've only seen like a big school of big shad. Like I'm talking like over 5 to 6 inches, like maybe once, mainly everything that we have around here in Ohio tends to be on the smaller side. You're looking at 3 inches or less a lot of times.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's typically where, for me, when I go back, when I'm not throwing a chatterbait in the river, I'm typically fishing our 3-inch minnows. Mm-hmm. And that's one of my go-to baits, and it's also my favorite topwater bait. Is that because I can throw that on an unweighted hook because the material's buoyant. It's basically a surface bait. So I can run that across shallow riffles and things like that, keep it up top, or I'll rig it on like an 1/8 ounce EWG. And, I can slow the swimming retrieve down, control the sink rate a lot better. Because, honestly, what produces a lot of fish is control. Having control over your presentation is really a huge factor. Being able to control my sink rate with any bait that I throw is a big factor for me. So I want to be able to control my depth. I want to control my retrieve speed. And that's a big factor for me. So when I am fishing swim baits, I'm either throwing the 4-inch diesel minnow or the 3-inch minnows. Most of the time, the 3-inch minnows, because I tell people for years, everything eats a 3-inch minnow.
Yeah.
What doesn't eat that? Everybody eats that. So I throw that quite often. And I do that a lot for smallies because, like you guys said, there's big shad that come into the Broad River. There's lots of them in there, but is that their everyday forage? Probably not. Their everyday forage is the smaller, more available bait fish that they can run into. So that's what I'm going to try to, appeal to them with, is that.
Yeah. So, Brad, you got anything else?
No, I'm just sitting here thinking I'm gonna try that ChatterBait without the skirt, man.
Brad's brain is just like, come on.
It is.
Well, if he didn't have his headphones on, I'd swear there'd be smoke coming out of his ears right now. There it is.
No, man, you inspired me to try this. I've never thought about putting that razor shad or diesel minnow on there. So
the diesel minnow is one of it's a great bait. Like I've used it before, and I should actually get kind of into using them more often because I became a big Kayak guy. But one of the huge downfalls to Kayak is its durability, and Z-Man with their plastics, it's bar none, man. Like, I've fished a TRD and caught, good 20 smallmouth, on one little TRD, and that thing would be thrashed, and you're like, yep, it's going to go one more time, one more time, and it just keeps coming out, and you're like, yep, those baits are so durable. They're even hard sometimes to put on whatever jig or whatever you're putting on. I was talking to Brad. Brad and I actually went out fishing today, and our conditions weren't the greatest. The weather warmed up a little bit, but we still had about a good solid 10-mile-per-hour winds. The river only had maybe at best 6 inches of clarity, and it's cold. It's 36 degrees outside. And I text Brad. I'm like, hey, dude, I have these Z-Man micro jigs, and I was like, I'm gonna throw these. I had the little I think it's like a little crustacean bug.
The crusties.
The crusties. So I'm like, dude,
thing.
this thing is going to be awesome, And then I text Brad. I'm like, dude, I can barely get this thing on because of the plastic is so durable. Right. It doesn't want to pass, by the keeper very well.
I'll tell you, here's a little tip for all your listeners out there, is that the key to rigging any Z-Man plastic onto a keeper is to pull it onto the keeper and not push it onto the keeper. Because when you try to push it onto the keeper, it wants to push back. But if you grab the material and pull it up and over the keeper, it'll typically lock on there pretty well.
All right.
But, face it, guys fishing plastics for years aren't used to being able to do that with a soft plastic bait. Grab it and just pull it up over a keeper without it tearing apart. But this isn't going to tear, so you don't have to worry about that. Grab it, pull it up onto the keeper, and that's the best way to do it.
It's kind of like it's kind of like the same kind of deal you got to do with the bullet finesse.
Yeah, you do.
The little EWG style. Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
I wish I would have thought of that because I've done it with those 100 times.
I've done them with the turbo crawls. So.
Yeah, just pull, don't push. That's the easiest way to rig it. It honestly is. But like I said, most guys aren't used to being able to do that or having to do that with their plastics. Yeah. And going back to your point with the diesel minnows and the swim baits, I think one advantage that we do have outside of the durability is we can make our baits softer than a lot of other companies can because of that. Like the diesel minnow and the regular minnows have such a softer body that it takes nothing to make that tail move.
Yeah.
Nothing at all. Any movement at all gets that tail immediately going in the water. Because, you know, when you use regular plastics, if you want to make them durable, you have to make them harder. And when you make them harder, you basically kill the action.
Yeah.
And with our material, we're not worried about it falling apart, so we can make it a little bit softer, giving you a lot more action in that tail than what you can get off of a regular plastic. And I think that, you know, like, you know, what Brad's been using that turbo crawl in the back, because those claws are so soft, it takes nothing to make those things move behind a jig at all.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with a swim bait. You look at the diesel minnow and the regular minnows, it takes nothing to get that tail moving at all behind any jig, because it's so soft and we're not worried about it falling apart. So there is a big advantage to that. So, you know, when you're looking for action out of a swim bait, that really gives us a big advantage over the others.
Yeah.
Really has. And with the popularity of the diesel minnow, we've been able to add new sizes. We have a 5 and a 7-inch version of that thing now too. So we've been able to expand that even more, because guys are like, oh my God, I love this bait. I wish you had a bigger profile in it. You know?
Yeah.
I want a bigger chunk of meat out there that wiggles. I was like, all right, cool. I got one for you.
Nice.
You know?
Well,
yeah.
we just hit an hour here, so we can start winding this down. Unless Josh has any other questions, I'm done. I mean,
Yeah, I think Glenn covered it. Glenn, I do appreciate you coming on and talking to us, man.
I will tell you this, Josh. If you could do me a favor, like after you get about 15 fish on a TRE, would you just cut it off and put on a new one, please? Help a brother out here, okay? I got a kid in college, man. I mean, come on.
I'm sorry, but I mean, that thing is, Brad and I were laughing. We're out there and I'm like, I've got this TRD, man. I was like, it's covered in grass still. It's like, it was a mess. And I'm like, but there's not like a single tear on it. Like,
yeah. I think I've caught probably close to 25 fish on one TRD in a day.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think the best we ever had was we had a guy send in a 4-inch finesse worm that caught 238 bass.
Wow.
What was it? 238 bass. There was like 6 crappie and a couple of warmouth or something. It was just like stupid statistics on this thing.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah. That's crazy.
One thing, you know, like you said, like it's real nice because you guys have that buoyancy too. And a lot of times when you get the buoyancy,
it's a big factor.
Yeah.
Look at, like, when you rig a swim bait, do you want it rolling over, falling over? No, you want it keeled. You want it balanced. You want it straight in the water, right? So when you rig a swim bait on a weighted EWG style hook and you use a material like Elastec, it's going to be balanced and keeled every time. So you could stop that thing dead and it'll sit on the bottom upright. Yeah. It won't roll over or fall over. You know, and for us here in Charleston, it's a huge factor for us. You know, when we use weighted EWGs or things like our weighted chin locks, it keeps us out of the oyster beds, because that bait is not going to roll over or grab oysters or anything like that. Yeah. It's going to just simply come right over the top of those oysters and never fall over or roll over. And regardless of my retrieve speed or, you know, letting it sink to the bottom, I know exactly what that bait is doing every second it's in the water. And that goes back to what we mentioned about control. Controlling your presentation is what produces fish. And that's a big factor right there, having that control. And that buoyancy is a major factor in your control over your presentation.
Yeah, I mean, if you got baits that are falling over, can you imagine you're a fish and you're sitting there like, oh, that looks good.
Oh,
why did it just fall over like that? What's happening?
Hey, that looks. Oh, no, it doesn't.
Nope, that's garbage.
Never mind. I was going to eat it. And then, no, I'm not going to.
That's funny.
All right, Glenn. Well, like I said before, we do appreciate you coming on. Anytime you feel like,
you guys are awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks.
if you feel like ever coming on the podcast, just reach out to Brad and I. You know, we'll be more than happy to have you back on.
Yeah, I'd love to do it again. I mean, there's so many techniques and different things out there to talk about when it comes to fishing that I'd be happy to come on and talk to you guys anytime.
Need to refer you over to our Bass Fishing for Noobs segment.
Yeah,
there you go.
He talks techniques with like big anglers all across the industry, so that'd be cool.
Yeah, I'd love to do it anytime for you guys. Anytime.
Thanks. So you got any anybody you'd like to thank? Sponsor shout outs, where people can follow you?
My employer, Z-Man.
Yeah.
One. And I mean, honestly, one of the luckiest people on the planet. I really am. I'm very fortunate to be doing what I'm doing. And I tell people all the time that even if I didn't work for Z-Man, I'd still be fishing this stuff just because I just love the quality. I love the control and everything I get out of fishing with this kind of stuff. And, I encourage people to get out and fish as often as they can. And that's really what this is about. Just get out and have fun.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tournament guys out there that are highly competitive. I'm not. Honestly, and going on as many decades as I've been in this industry, I can count on one hand the number of actual tournaments I've fished in my life. Seriously. When I fish, it's for me. I just love to just take the kayak out and just go float around by myself in just total solitude where it's nice and quiet and just enjoy some time on the water. That's what it's about for me. I just love to go out and fish. And it's always fun when I have buddies go out, and I'll get competitive with them.
Yeah.
I really get competitive with them when they show up. God forbid any of the young guys that work for me, start to outfish me. It gets bad then. But
Awesome.
But it's one of those things that I enjoy every second I get on the water, and the reason that I get on the water is because I truly enjoy it. It's not to win prizes or anything or to shoot videos. It's just for me just to enjoy my time on the water, enjoy the resources that we have here because they're fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. Where can people follow you on social media?
Actually, if they wanted to follow me personally, it would be at Fish Rockstar, which actually what that would be. There's really an annoying story behind that we won't get into, but it's actually Fish_Rockstar behind that because I do have a musician background thingy that's tended to haunt me and follow me the rest of my life. So, but they can do that, and then at Z-Man Fishing for sure on Instagram and on Facebook, because we're constantly posting things. We love to share pictures that we get from people who follow us. So if you're not following Z-Man right now, you need to. There's some great content on there. We post our videos on there. We're always refreshing it. And like I said, when people show us cool stuff, we love to share it with everybody else.
Yeah.
So if you want to get a fish picture in front of 270,000 people, it's probably a good way to do it. Just send it to us.
Yeah.
You better watch out. Brad's gonna be loading you guys up with pictures now.
Tagging you every time I catch a fish on the Brad or
There you go. I'm be looking for it.
Well, awesome. Again, thank you for coming on the show, Glenn. We'll talk to you some time down the road, I'm sure. And you have a good night.
All right, you guys too. Thanks a lot again. I really appreciate the time. You guys are fantastic.
Thank you, Glenn.
All
Thanks.
right, buddy.
Have a good night, everybody.
All right. Bye.
See ya.
Go check out the website, guys, paddle_fin.com. Also check out YouTube, youtube.com/paddleandfin. If you got a question, comment, want to hear from a future guest, feel free to email us at paddle_fin@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We're doing giveaways, announcements, things like that at Facebook and Instagram at paddleandfin. Shout out to our show supporters, Rocktown Adventures, Loveland Canoe and Kayak, Hammered Lures, Fish Mob Lures, TRC Covers, Ketch Products. Go to ketchproducts.com. You can put the Paddle and Fin logo right on your catch board. Don't forget to go over and pick up your JigMasters Jigs. Use promo code PNF20 and save 20% today. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to. It helps grow the audience, helps others find our podcast. So please drop a 5-star rating in on the podcast platform you're listening on. Don't forget about the recycled plastics program, you guys. Take your used plastic baits, put them in an envelope, mail them to the address in the show notes. Our man Eric Richards at Hammered Lures melts those down, makes new baits, and donates them to various chapters of Heroes on the Water.